What's going on, everybody? It is the Drinking with Drew show. I am Drew. We have an amazing show lined up today. We have Scott Burns, Dan Johnson, and Tim Hubbard in studio. This is a show I've been waiting for. I've paid these guys millions of dollars to come in studio.
Multi-millions.
Ask their accountants.
You got paid?
He got you what?
You could have paid.
So, these guys, I appreciate them coming in. We're going to have an excellent show. I have many questions for them as I've been texting and calling and getting calls from around the world, and everybody's like little Santa Claus sending me all these questions to ask these guys. So we're going to see what we can knock out, and, who knows? They might tell me to fuck off. I don't know. We have had a couple drinks in studio. I promise they're not filthy drunk, but it is just enough to get them comfortable and lazy-eyed. We'll see how that works out. So, welcome to the show, and be prepared. This is going to be an amazing show, and I haven't even told them yet, but I have a secret guest calling in shortly. So, it is the Drinking with Drew show. My name's Drew, and I'm drinking.
Let's go, people.
And now, from the CapsFlorida.com studios in Riverview, Florida, it's the Drinking with Drew show.
Cock's out. It's pool time. Grab some beers.
He was burning wood. How come he didn't whip his dick out?
She sounds bangable to me.
Warm pink center.
It's going to be a good show.
Listen, those people are fucking nuts.
I'm banging.
Bada boom, bada bing, huh?
He said wiener in the comments.
Hey, you guys know I've banged before.
Somebody pooped in your cereal.
This lighting is freaking me out, man.
Plumber's butt crack looks like boobs.
I can slam those beers, but people usually don't.
All right. We are back. So let's go around the room and get our official intros in. Scott Burns, welcome to the Drinking with Drew show, man.
How you doing, Drew? Good to be here.
Thank you again for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Dan Johnson, what's up, Dan? Oh, where's Dan at? Oh, I forgot to take Dan off mute. Go ahead, Dan.
I'm right here.
There you are.
Right here.
There you are. All right. And Tim Hubbard. What's going on, Tim? So these guys, look, I understand you guys don't like to be called legends. I get it. It's kind of the same word you've heard over and over again. So I'm not going to use that word, but I'm just going to say it. The metal scene would not be what it is today without the guys who are sitting in this room. Not only the Tampa metal scene, but the metal scene and the metal music, the images that Tim put out, letting all these kids know this is what metal looks like back in the day. It was me. I was that 15-year-old kid looking at the Obituary and Deicide albums and understanding what the scene was, I mean, so it's not just the music, it's the images, it's how people just started flocking to Tampa to get a part of that piece of that pie that was Tampa metal back in the day. So I'm just going to go in. I'm going to start with Dan. Dan, kind of, man, you were Avatar, Par Records, Crimson Glory. Tell me how that all started. You got into Tampa. Give me the snowball effect. You get into Tampa. Were you born in Tampa?
No, I was actually born in Northern Illinois, and I was at a graduation party, and this would have been in 1976, and a girl who I did know, she was at the party, had asked if anybody was interested in driving a vehicle down to Florida because they were moving, and they had an extra vehicle. She'd pay for my flight back, and I volunteered.
There you go.
And so I got down here, and I guess the rest is history. I never really made it back.
Now, were you dating this chick, or were you just kind of helping a friend out, or?
No, she was just we were at the same party.
Okay.
I had not met
That's
her.
a big favor. I mean, did you decide at that point you're moving to Florida?
No.
You were just helping. You thought you'd be back and here for what, a couple days?
Yeah, my intentions were to drive the vehicle down, spend a couple of days here, and then fly back home.
What happened?
Well, we got down here, and I wanted to stay a few more days. So I met somebody across the street, a guy my age, who said, "Hey, you can stay with me if you want to hang out for a little bit." And I said, "Sure." So a couple of weeks turned into a couple of months, and yeah.
Now, were you doing sound at that point, or
No.
when did that start?
No. This would have been in '76, and I really didn't start working with that in that end of the business until about '80 or '81.
Okay.
And we started out with the fanzine back in the Tampa Bay area back then, and really, I was a record collector, and so I would spend a lot of time in record stores, a few record stores here locally, and contacting people overseas, doing tape trading, things like that, the normal things. And one thing led to another. We started the fanzine, and then I started through the fanzine. I made some contacts in out on the left coast, the west coast, a couple of people out there that were into metal back in the day, and then Metal Mike over in Europe. And I wanted to try to figure out how to turn this hobby that I had. People would come over and we'd hang out, and I'd ask them what kind of music they liked, and they'd name a couple of bands. And I was into pulling out this really obscure shit that they've never heard before, but taking in what they had said. And like, here, listen to this. What do you think of this? And people would be like, wow, that's great, and I've never heard of them. Who are they? And so it started out like that. And I wanted to figure out how I thought I knew what sounded good. I was able to impress people or whatever with different things that I had in my library. And I wanted to figure out how to take that hobby and turn it into something that was more of a business. And from that evolved Par Records.
Now, was Par Records, when you first started that, was it a long-term vision, or was it a hobby business? What was the goal initially?
It was meant to be a long-term business. At that time, I don't even, Brian Slagle had started the Metal Massacre compilations back then. And then there weren't really that many independent labels that were doing metal. So I thought, well, let's give it a shot. And it was intended to be a long-term thing.
Okay.
But it was started on a shoestring budget.
Okay.
So,
and in walks John Oliva. How did that process work?
Well, I'll go back a little bit further. So my wife at the time was pregnant with one of my kids, and she was in one of the local supermarkets, and she had slipped and fallen on a grape. And
wow.
That's why grapes now you see are in containers, right? So we were fortunate enough to get a little bit of money out of that deal. And with that money is how I started Par Records.
Okay.
And we started going, I was following local shows, and there were several local bands. And really the first band that I ever did anything with was a band called Brat, which was more of a hard rock band. We had recorded their record up in Georgia, in a studio up in Georgia, and I had only released the single. And then I would run into Avatar, and that was at a talent show at the Capitol Theater in downtown Clearwater.
Okay.
That was the very first time that I was exposed to them, and one thing led to another, and we worked out a deal to.
Now, was this the first time they ever recorded
Yes.
in a studio, or had any professional audio recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. As far as I know, I mean, yeah,
Okay.
it was the very first time. So,
How were they in studio?
well,
Were they tight, have their stuff down, or was it practice this while we're in studio type of situation?
Well, we did have a budget.
Okay.
So, there's you read a lot of stories about it was recorded in one day. It was not recorded and mixed in one day. It was, I believe that I paid Morris Sound for 60 hours, which with Morris Sound, as Scott will attest, it was probably really 80 hours if I paid for 60 hours. So it was the
Now,
whole thing.
were you pulling the Scott and sleeping on the couch and that whole thing?
No. We drove over there. It was just I think the sessions were at night, and everybody just drove over there. We met over there, and we did it really in about 5 days.
Okay.
Whole recording, overdubs, mixing, and it was all done in about 5 days, and special effects, all that stuff. Everything was done in 5 days.
And then before the album was actually released, they do the name change.
Correct. We had released the 7-inch City Beneath the Surface as Avatar, and we had been notified that there was a band in Europe called Avatar that had actually released something that was, and I can't recall exactly what it was, but we decided at that point in time, let's not take a chance.
Okay.
And then they
they came up with the name Sabotage?
Oh yeah, they came up with the
Okay.
name. Yeah, that was entirely their doing. So
How long did that take? Was it a week process or a?
boy, that's a long time ago. That's 45 years ago. I honestly don't remember exactly how long it took, but you can see through a lot of the old images that the logo changed several times during that time.
Right.
And then there's Sabotage, TSO.
Now, when did Crimson Glory come along?
Well, after Sabotage, I was contacted by a couple of labels if I was interested in doing recording with a couple of other bands. So at that time, Agent Steel, Combat had approached me to do the Agent Steel record. And I did that. And so Crimson Glory would have been 80, 85, 80, around 85. So, and then in between, I started also now working with some other bands as well.
Okay.
So.
Do what, Damage, and then what was the other band?
Yeah. Damage was another par. Yeah, Damage was another par band. So the very first release was the Brat single. Then there was the Avatar 7-inch. Then I did a licensing deal for the Pretty Maids EP to do the U.S. release, and then Sirens, and then Dungeons, and then after that would have been Damage. Yeah, I think that's the order.
Okay. Very cool. And we're going to talk more about that. Now, the 45, the ones that are out with Avatar, those are the scarce high collectibles that, what are they fetching?
Some of them go, I guess if it's the yellow vinyl, I mean, it's several $1,000s.
Okay.
For it's.
We've got to find
crazy.
one for Josh Jones. He's
probably already on a hunt for
he
it.
probably who knows? He probably has one. He's an avid vinyl collector. So
I get the question all the time.
Right.
Do you have an extra one? And
now, are you able to talk about the story you were telling me in the green room?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So go into that with how you didn't have them for a very long time, and then you suddenly kind of do.
So I was married to Barb, who was my wife at the time, and she was actively involved in Par Records. Actually, if you look back, she was listed as the president of Par Records. And we, after 25 years of marriage, we got divorced. Part of my divorce settlement was that all of the Par Records stuff was hers. I had to give up everything. I did not have a single record or cassette tape from any of the stuff that was released on Par, unless I would have went out and bought it. But all of the copies that I had, promotional whatever, and including a box of the yellow, 25 of the yellow vinyl 45s, and a couple of the 12-inch colored vinyl boxes of that. Unfortunately, I lost I gave up in the divorce. So, and then unfortunately, Barb passed away a couple of years ago. God rest her soul. And my son had said, here's all this Par Records stuff that was Mom's, and asked me if I wanted it.
And it was in good condition. She kept it.
It's not in great condition, but it's a lot of the business side of the stuff, contracts. Back then, the artwork was, you had to cut and paste your artwork, and so some of it was some of the ads that we had placed. Track sheets, there's some old masters that are in there, and yeah,
that's awesome.
It's good stuff.
So
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving along to Tim. So I want to start with this. Just recently, Tim got some accolades. Tim Hubbard, still skating. How old are you, Tim?
You never ask somebody how old they are.
I can ask Tim how old he is.
Very.
Still skating. What's your board of choice? Like when you go out, you're skating at.
Yeah, I ride a death box.
Okay.
Old school.
Now, how long? So the board you have, is that an old school board, or are you switching it up? Okay.
I really don't like the popsicle stick so much.
Okay.
But I have a slalom board that this new style that's going on now it's a rocket machine. It's just unbelievably fast, and it gets faster as you go. So it's really quite amazing technology nowadays.
Now, what's your latest your history of injuries on the skateboard? Because you don't repair the same way you do in your 20s.
No, it's a lot slower.
I mean, I know you're in your 40s now, so
yeah, a little bit. When you slam, it really hurts, and I've taken quite a few here and there. More now. Well, you feel it more now than when you're younger.
Oh yeah.
I've backed off a lot on bull riding and stuff like that. I don't want to slam like some of the stuff I've taken, but
So what's the official
you never
title?
Stop doing it.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's it's a great thing. Florida Skateboard Hall of Fame.
That's awesome.
It's a great organization. It's they almost everyone out of it really does positive things, and that's what the whole thing is all about. So
now, and you recently had is it still? It's still going on, isn't it? Over in St. Pete.
St. Pete No Clubs Productions, 40 years of their shows. I have some pictures in that representing some of the early 10 years, 20 years of their shows. They were amazing, really good. They brought everything that we liked into the town.
Now,
Tony and Dave were amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, how did that work? So did they call you and say, we're doing this show, we're putting your art in there, your photos in there, and that's kind of how it went? Exactly. They had a list of photographers they worked with throughout the years. They knew who to kind of go to?
Work with is this. So me and Scott are old friends. We are into punk rock, record collectors ourselves. That's how it all ends up being. We're all record collectors, right? We're obsessed with record collector and seeing shows, and that's what we did. That was our hobby. So we started that a long time ago. One obsession leads to another, I guess. I don't know. Where were we going with this?
Well, I'm just talking about that show in particular. So you've got.
So No Club started out or what I started out doing was bringing my camera to punk rock shows. I wanted to see the band. I wanted to start shooting the band. I snuck it in a few times, and I noticed I was the only one taking pictures there because nobody liked punk rock, And so eventually I just walked in with my camera, and then eventually the promoters let me in to shows, and then it was just a relationship, and I would give them stuff, and I was helping promote their shows with pictures in the magazines and stuff. So it was just a relationship that happened. Tony and Dave are the greatest guys in this area. They brought in the shows we wanted to see, so it was just a mutual thing, a lot of fun. So they were looking for stuff. They know I had pictures. I've given them books before and photo albums and stuff, and then so Robbie, who's running it, helped us put it all together. So that's how that ended up.
Back in the day,
just
though,
to give them stuff from the appreciation of what they did for the community.
Now you're shooting film back in the day, obviously.
Lots of film.
You still have these negatives archived,
all of it,
safekeeping. And are you like, how many prints are you making still from negatives that people want? Are people like, hey man, he's like, when David Gelke had Sessions Scott's book come out, you did so many photos from that book. Are you now digitizing those old images just easier production?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Just turning everything digital, finding the ones you need to slowly go through it and you pick out the ones you think. Just like, something you do for a print, now we're making it full-time digital so we can preserve it forever and get it out there still.
Right.
So I shot stuff that people didn't want to shoot. We were talking earlier about the bands. They wanted to see the hair bands, the pretty guys. He called me and told me about this band Obituary in the studio that needed pictures. What's death metal? It's extreme, it's hard, it's fast. All right, let's do it. And I was shooting pictures of stuff I liked. My bands, the punk rock bands. It was extreme. It was edgy. That's what I enjoy. That's what I wanted. So when he's brought Obituary, he says yes, because it wasn't the hair thing. So it was an easy fit to go do them too, because nobody liked this stuff, right?
Right.
There's 300 people at shows on both sides. 40, 50 years later, it's huge, and everybody still wants to see what a few people have pictures of.
Right.
So there was always one guy, two guys there, maybe a guy with video cameras once the 90s hit. But there was
now you're doing you're showing up at Morrisound, and we're gonna.
Well, not showing up.
Not yet. Well, yeah, you're at first though. Scott's inviting you to meet the bands, and I'm going forward a little bit to where looking at the book. There's a lot of photos in there from Morrisound with the bands recording, and we'll get into that. But initially, when you and Scott met, okay, let's go back that far. Scott knew you were a skater, obviously, but a photographer as well, and you were the go-to guy that he contacted for the initial photo shoot of Obituary. It wasn't a live show or anything like that. It was just more of a controlled photo shoot.
It was album cover because they were they were kids. Nobody knew what this was gonna, nobody thinks about photos for it. Oh, you need photos, and they're in there recording, and I would think it was just like, hey, let me call Tim. We were just friends. We know each other. He knew I was a hobby. He knew I loved doing photography. I was just shooting my own bands for fun. So he knew a photographer, so he gave me a call, right? And we got really lucky with the first shot with Big Daddy being there blowing up Ybor City and nobody arresting us, so
that was
the
great.
Back
cover of Slowly We Ride.
Yeah, Slowly We Ride.
Now, whose idea was that? Was that John's, or just somebody brought some?
He called me and said, look, I said, I don't know how we ended up in Ybor, but we knew it was going to be a dark picture. It was a death metal thing. It's going to be weird no matter what. But then they bring Big Daddy, and they're blowing up flash pots of fire 20 feet high in an alleyway several times. There was I'm pretty sure a Monday night, and there wasn't crickets. It was an abandoned town. This was before what Ybor is.
Right.
If you saw what we were blowing up on both sides of 7th Avenue in lots that were buildings that were just crumbled, it was amazing. So we got a good shot, and I did another shot of them being hanged.
Right.
I did 2 shots of deicide, and then I've been working ever since in the industry because of those 4 pictures.
Right. Now with Obituary, did you know you were shooting an album cover when you did? Okay. Yeah. So it was the purpose of the photo shoot was to get an album cover
for that first thing. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then it was promo after promo after promo, and just continued through the, it was one phone call to another,
That photo shoot, how many, first off, was it a few hours, an hour? How many photos did you actually go through with trial and error, with getting the band right and getting the fireworks, or I call them fireworks, but we don't want to say the E word on the podcast. We might get,
probably 3 hours down there at night.
Okay.
4 hours maybe, and, rolls of film, couple cameras, everybody just pointing and waiting for the next explosion. We tried a couple other things, and then you just send the record label the ones they want. There was a really, really good shot we did with flame on both sides, even flame going up really high on both sides, but apparently the slide got held and checked out too many times where it got scratched.
Hmm.
So they ended up, I'm pretty sure they went to the silhouette just because that was the next thing, you know. And then, you know, people didn't do that, you know. And
Right.
Scott said it's like, dude, everybody don't. It's a mystery on the back, you know. And what's this extreme music, you know? And then you just said something on the opening, which was exactly it, you know. It's like none of my pictures are pretty, right? And nobody's smiling, you know. 40 years later, when you see these pictures at the museum, when I have 100 pictures on the wall of all these bands over this time period, they all have the same look, you know. There's no Photoshop.
Right.
It's just raw and rough, and it tells it what it is, you know. That's all it's ever supposed to have been. So
Now,
it ain't pretty.
jumping forward 45 years, you're doing different types of work, but you're still shooting bands.
Same thing. Yep.
Direction-wise, when you're shooting a band like Obituary and Deicide, are
Right.
you looking at Glenn and saying, Glenn, do this, do that? Or are you like, hey, man, you guys do what you got to do, and I'll just photograph it?
Well, it just depends where you're at, number one. But after I did the last shot of Deicide at my house in the studio, so a couple weeks or whatever later, the dude, somebody calls me. It's like, all right, we need the vertical pictures of Glenn and the band for the magazine cover. You know, it's got to be tall, vertical
Right.
shot, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, Glenn ain't doing a teepee, you know, pose here. You know, they're going to stand there, and I'm going to walk around and find different angles to shoot them at.
Right.
Right. And that's the way they all are. You know, you get them in a position because you got to get them close to each other. But you know, nobody's posing. You know, it's up. I got to find the angle, and then you know, we're blasting death metal, and you know, you're serious. It's just like they're playing. They're being them. You
Right.
know, and that's that. You know, so.
What is your preferred photo shoot, if you were per se? I know shooting a concert isn't necessarily a photo shoot, but would you rather be shooting a show, doing like an album cover type of shoot, or in the studio doing kind of candids?
Yes.
That yeah, all of them.
Yeah, it's all
All of the above.
All equal.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just being a photographer. It's different, but you have an all access pass everywhere you want to go, you know. And then, but you're treated like you're not there on purpose. You're invisible, you know, so you can get people's realness,
Right.
right? And that's what you're trying to do, is show the realness. You know, if the band's playing Happy Meal song, you know, it's gonna be all smiley and cheesy and shit. And I probably won't be at that shoot, you know. Everything I've shot is because I wanted to, you know, that's what I want. That's what I wanted to be around, right? So if you're around what you like, everybody's the same, everybody's comfortable. You're just doing your thing. So it's pure pleasure, and that's all I want to do. You know, it's that all access thing has a lot to do with all of it.
Right. Have you ever shot a band that you just didn't meld with, that the photos just came out and
Very
you could
few,
tell that the
very
photo
few.
shoot just wasn't what it should have been?
Very few, because then I wouldn't be doing it right, you know. So, you know, what you never see is how much we're laughing. You never see how much every single photo session in a studio or in a location is how funny these guys are. And he knows from sitting in studios in delirious hours, you know, there are some funny things said, and you are always crying with tears, laughing so hard at every point of this, because it's so extreme. You always have a breaking point, you know. Somebody does one thing stupid or one thing, you know, and chirps, and it's over for 10 minutes, you know, and you're just laughing your ass off, you know. And those are the times you don't take pictures. You're laughing with them, you know. So there's always this trust thing, you know. He's not recording these conversations when he's back there and people are talking shit, you know.
Right.
That never ends up on the end tape, you know.
Right.
So it's the same thing, you know. And then if he was, they wouldn't be coming to him anymore.
Right.
You know? The record, they wouldn't be calling me anymore. You know, I get calls because it's just the go-to guy, because it's just easy, and that's that. You know, we're gonna get what you're looking for. You know, I don't know. It's just different.
What is your opinion about the latest, 2026? Now we have iPhones everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You've got them just you can't go to a concert without seeing 50 iPhones. They're kind of blowing up the industry. People just throwing around pictures left and right.
Yeah.
Has it watered down the industry, or bands still know who shoots the right photos and go to the same process?
I'll tell you, the iPhones are amazing, number one. And I'm glad I don't have to make a living in this business anymore. Number two, as a photographer, I still am, but I couldn't imagine going into the photography business right now and trying to make a living out of it. It's changing the thing. There's only certain types of fields you can do, which are event things, you know. But there was a band who did their own photos not too long ago. I saw the beginning of their photos coming out, you know, and I kind of almost made the phone call to them myself to, you know, help them out. And they ended up calling me because they got flack from what they were doing, right? So, and it's just because they're great technology, but it's just like when graphic artists, everybody was a computer owner, it could be a graphic artist. Well, after a couple of years, you figure out, man, not so much, you know? So you need people to do some of
Do you miss the film days?
No.
No?
I take so many pictures now.
It'd drive you crazy.
I get
right?
to experiment so much, and that's where you end up with the great stuff when you're shaking the camera on long exposures in the middle of the night with flashes going off. You know, I get to experiment more than ever. So
Tell
I
me
take
about
thousands of pictures.
Tell me about the photo shoot you did with Deicide with the blood on the face. How did that go down?
That was like the fourth or fifth shoot time together. It was at my old house, which was me and I roommated with an old friend of ours, and it was Glenn's idea thing. It was a like it was an early latex thing he had on with all this.
Well, I noticed in sessions David actually put in the text it was acrylic, not real blood. Was that just kind of to keep people happy and not have people breathing down your neck, assuming it was real blood or animal blood or something like that?
Well, he used to throw buckets of blood out on people live at live stage, but that thing was a latex with stage blood. It was amazing how long that stuff lasted. I still have the bottle somewhere.
Now, you and Scott did a photo shoot kind of together where Scott put some caskets together. And the plan seemed to go well, but I guess in the end it didn't really turn out very well, or it wasn't the bang for the buck that it was supposed to be.
Well, it's hard to say that when it's still the second most famous picture out there. So there's that. Right, good press, bad press. You know?
Right. Yeah.
I blame the idea on Scott, but it was a good idea at that. It was a really good idea at that time. It's just what happened is the boys kind of changed during that time. When the first time we shot, the first 10 times, you know, they were still really young, you know, and they were every shot. Trevor would be growling and throwing his eyes up in his head and everything, you know. And then they went around the world once or twice, and then they came back. And there's this casket thing they weren't all into so much, you know. So it was more like, oh, all right, you know, they weren't as willing participants as much as we thought they would be.
Right.
And then people, you know, it ended up on an album cover for like the best of, and, you know, everybody references it. So you got to have a bad one. You might as well have that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Who cares if anybody criticizes it? They noticed it, didn't they?
Right.
They still talk about it, good or bad.
Definitely.
So whatever, it's just a picture, man.
Well, you can go to band with the Crimson Glory mask.
It's funny because I almost was going to shoot them for promo pictures, you know, and something happened. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but we were talking about doing something, and they already had the mask thing going. So I didn't know who they were because I didn't know anybody on that side of the field because they weren't who I was hanging out with. You know, we were doing punk rock stuff, you know,
right?
And then this death metal thing grew, so. It was two different worlds in Tampa Bay. You know, we were the little things, you know, but who knew 40 years later what it would become?
Right.
So we're all good.
Scott.
Those are the guys that did it, though. I just was recorded.
Tell me about the first time
all of them.
You remember meeting Tim back in the day. You guys were friends before the recording, or how did that work out?
Oh, yeah. After high school, we worked together at the restaurant.
Yep.
And we had his roommates.
Girlfriends.
Yeah. My wife's known Tim forever, and our friend Stiff Pole, who passed away, Rick. He had we worked all at the same restaurant, and like I said, I grew up on hard rock because everybody did, and rock and roll and stuff. But I really, when punk rock came around in the early 70s, I liked it. And I think we were just all working together, and somebody had like on a Clash or a Sex Pistols button, and we started talking because, like you said, there wasn't a lot of people around doing it back in the day. It was really underground for no matter what style you were listening to. And then we just started hanging out and going to shows and stuff. And so a mutual friend of ours had a band, and that's how I started recording was I did live sound for them. And then they won a contest and documented. But anyway, so the studio sucked. So I went around to look around, and that's how I went to Jim and Tom's place and Rick Miller's Morrisound. That's back when Dan was at the old studio on Nebraska, which is the first incarnation of Morrisound. Florida Avenue.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, Florida. That's correct. And, so I started working there as an assistant. And like I said, through later on, Tim was, we still go to shows, and he was doing his thing in photography, and that's when some of the labels, they needed somebody to do photography. And like I said, I just remember telling Tim, like I said, you won't believe like John's voice from Obituary. I said, he makes like some of the punk rock guys sound mellow, you know what I mean, like how extreme it is.
Now the term death metal was not around at that point, correct? Or was it
I think it was.
Yeah,
Circus
it was
Death
that day.
Yeah.
I know that when he talked to me.
It was. Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, because Chuck really, that stuff coined the term. But yeah, it was around for sure. And like I said, and the Atheist guys were Ravage, and they were one of the first bands around at the time too, and stuff. But if you go back to like what Dan is, talking to him is, he really, in the hook with Slagle and stuff, because Nasty Savage, they were recording with Jim, and they were big in the Ronnie was big in the fanzine scene, as Drew, and so all the bands, Dan started, like I said, he had Sabotage, and then Nasty Savage, the Obituary guys, they were 14, 15, they were going to Olin Mills to take pictures. And I don't know if...
So when you told Tim, hey, I've got this death metal band, he knew what you were talking about and the what that involved, or were the bands kind of, because death, yes, but the pictures weren't there. So I guess you had to still imagine what the photos were or what the bands were like. Were there still, like, where was Tim or you, where were you getting the images from to know what Obituary looked like back then?
He was just saying, this is an extreme music. These guys are hard. They're harder than punk. So that's just it. That's what the style. I was always been into the photography. Was always, skateboarding. It was extreme sports. It was always edgy. We were shooting punk rock bands. That's what. And so wouldn't have called me if it was another rock band for something, because it just, we weren't seeing those people, He was telling me about this new extreme fast singer's voice. So that paints the image right there.
Right.
And we would ended up with some dark shots in Ybor City where we were at. But those flames, that Big Daddy, those are game changer in the very beginning of time.
Right.
To do that as kids.
But they
brought that stuff. And they were doing it, like you said, on stage and everywhere. That was only new to me to see pyro that big outside.
Now, had you met Obituary prior to the photo shoot?
Day.
Or was it, this is the photo shoot, hi John, hi Donald, that day you met them?
That day, yes.
Okay.
We had 1,000 shoots after. I'm still shooting them today.
Yeah, for sure.
Great guys. I'm trying more now to archive this whole
So when you met them, was it like, okay, this is what I have, this is the product I have to shoot? Was there any direction, or was it like you guys, obviously the jeans, t-shirt, that's what you're shooting, but did you pick Like, were you, let's go to Ybor, or did they
Right,
say,
because just the imagery. I knew there was bricks and old there. Rough. Where else you gonna go? That was the dirty, low, rough punk rock. Look, we were going to the Cuban Club down there
Right.
when it was empty.
Okay.
There used to be 2 police officers patrolled Ybor City, and I'm sure they were both off that night. There was
Right.
just an empty place. The only people that showed up were punk rockers at Cuban Club shows,
Yeah.
or one other Impulse finally. But I don't know. But we just knew that was the place to go. There was no other place, right? So we're going to do some kind of extreme. All I knew, there was alleyways and brickways there, and so we were going to go in some, a couple. And the first alley we met in, basically, we met in an alley, and it's these dudes, and that's that. Let's start shooting, and we just walked around and shot pictures of why they set up some pyro, and we stood in front of that and counted that down, and I think we did that 2 or 3 times. And then we packed up and went to the other side of 7th Street, and we walked around a couple buildings down that aisle, and Big Daddy was setting up some more flames, and we did 1 or 2 more exposures over there, and by then it was 4 hours later, and that was that.
Mhm.
I'm sure we started meeting after that to look at the pictures and
Okay.
get ready to send a package up to Roadrunner Records, and I got lucky. They loved it, and it worked from there.
yeah,
Got first album cover of a band, 1989, I think. All right, that was a great start. And then I got another phone call. Hey, we're gonna do Deicide. It's either Deicide or ACF next, but it was those 1, 2, 3. And those 1, 2, 3 bands are still playing 40 years later, still killing it. So
right.
it's amazing.
All right. I've got a guy that I want you guys to talk to here. Give me a second.
Hey, Drew.
David Gelke, what's up, man?
What's up? How's it going?
Good. I got Scott, Dan, and Tim in studio. They can hear you. Let's
All right.
say hey to Dave here. I
What's going on, David?
I snuck this in to
Hey,
Dave
guys.
earlier, and man, you did an amazing job on sessions for Scott, man. And I wanted to patch you guys in to talk about this. And we haven't gotten into the book. We haven't talked to Scott much about things. I just wanted to get you in here real quick and give you kind of a rebirth on the book.
Sure, absolutely.
So, Scott, what was it like writing this book? And I was told that, was it Tim's idea to put this book together?
Well, Tim had the original idea. We were sitting one day having lunch at the Havana Harry's,
Right.
and he wanted to do something, a photo book, and so I would relate some stories about some photos or some of the bands and things like that, and that's probably how the original idea came through, was Tim's idea about doing a photo book and the story of the bands told through the photos. And I really like that from the artistic, thing of just like looking at the photos. Because to me, like we all said, is just all fans of the bands or the scene and everything. And it's just fun to look back and say, oh, remember that show, look at that picture, or look at this from this day or whenever, and things like that. And at the same time I think, David was doing the obituary book, and we had talked quite a lot, for on and off for months, right, David? I think, and
Yeah, right. We had met during the making of the obituary book, and then once that wrapped, I think that's when you had shared that you and Tim had talked about doing something and whether I wanted to be involved. And of course, that was a no-brainer because I think by then, like you said, Scott, we were talking quite a bit. So an opportunity to do something with you and Tim was too good to pass up.
yeah, and I think and so I think it really worked out well because, like I said, David's a professional writer, has done a lot of books, and so I think it came out really well. And like I said, as we got Tim's photos in there, and to me the important part was to document the scene of Tampa. Like I said, the whole culture of the studio, like I said, going back with Dan, I mean, he really, in the beginning, was the start of it. and Jim and Tom and the Morrises and everything. And, Drew, you were saying you were living down the road in Temple Terrace, so you know it very well, Drew. I mean, all that. So I think that was the important thing, it was just nice to talk about it as fans and stuff like that. It's just something grassroots, down to earth. You know what I mean?
The birthplace of a genre.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Up until then, there was thrash, punk, thrash.
Yep.
Black metal.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that death metal thing, that's definitely a Tampa.
Yeah.
A Tampa thing.
But like I said, you started off with, doing Sabotage, and like I said, Agent Steel and Whiplash through Roadrunner, and then you had the connection to Noise through Carl, and David, you did a book on Noise, so I mean you're very well, aware of that. But I think that really fought between all the bands and stuff like that. It really gave Morrisound a reputation, and really Jim and Tom and Rick Miller, who's no longer with us, you really have to give them a lot of credit, because it was really the only real studio around. I mean, there wasn't any really good studios that were professional that you could go to, and especially to record hard, heavy, fast music, things like that and you know what I mean? They really did that, as we talk about in the book.
It turns out we were turning out sonically quality products with something that other people nobody had really been able to achieve at that point.
Correct.
And at a very low price.
Correct.
for the labels. And that's why I think so much of the work came through.
That is true, though, because I see some of the prices listed in the book, and I was shocked at some of the prices I saw.
They wanted, as David put in the book, they wanted the $100,000 record for $6,000
for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, going back, Dan, I mean, you were a testament with stuff you did with you and Jim and Tom, is that those records came out sounding really good, and people, especially when it got faster, most people just said, oh, it's okay to be muddy or whatever. But I think that really helped out the studio's reputation. And, people like Monty at Roadrunner and Brian at Metal Blade and Carl at Noise, the Century Media guys, they knew that the studio was trustworthy to put out a product, on a limited budget that was good.
Yep, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you say, David?
Yeah, no, I would agree. It was the right place at the right time for that. If you think about, like sort of what Dan said, the studio budgets way back then, if for the thrash bands, they were getting the 6-figure studio budgets, but the death metal bands, what was it, Scott? The Scott Burns special, $10,000, 2 weeks in the studio, Dan Seagrave artwork, and there you go, right? That's basically what it was. But I mean, it was tremendously successful, and all these legendary records came out from all of that, and young bands went in there, and that was oftentimes their first time being in a professional studio, and they got to work with people like Dan and Scott, and sort of brought them into the world of what it was like to be a professional band and play tight and be under the microscope like that. So a lot of those bands who did their early records at Morrisound will tell you what a transformative experience it was, because you couldn't fake it. You had to play your stuff tight, or Dan or Scott would call you out on it. So I think a lot of those things led to Morrisound quickly becoming ground zero for all of those things. And if you look at all the records now, I mean, a lot of them are classics, and it's easy to see why. I mean, it's such a great moment in time.
David, with the just how many people you interviewed for the book, did you foresee it going as smoothly as it did, or did you get some roadblocks or some pushback from bands that either had problems in the past, no longer together, or politics? And
no, I mean, yeah, this is interesting. Like, you can go back to what Tim and Scott. The original idea was to do like a sort of like a table, coffee table book, right, that focused on Tim's pictures, and thankfully Tim was kind enough to let us use a lot of his pictures. But as we went along with the books and all these we kept on getting in touch with all these bands who wanted to talk to Scott, and then we soon realized we had all these stories, and we weren't about to leave them on the cutting room floor. So no, Drew, I mean, doing Scott's book was actually really easy because a lot of the bands were willing to talk about him, and they mostly had all good things to say. There were a few exceptions, which we always joke about, but no, for the most part, it was really easy to do, and thankfully, because of the internet, that makes it easy to, I wouldn't say easy, but it makes it easier to find people versus trying to find someone in the phone book or something like that.
Right.
So, no, I mean, yeah, there was almost 70 bands total in the book, and I did well over 100 interviews plus for it. But it never felt like work because all these guys were almost all enthusiastic to talk about Scott and their experiences. So it was definitely one of the easier books that I've had the pleasure of putting together.
Very cool. All right, man. Well, we thank you for calling in and
Dave.
giving us
thanks for
Very
having
good.
me. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Drew. Yeah, and then thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, David. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
David Gelke.
Cool.
I threw that in on you. I knew you wouldn't mind, but I've been reading that book, and I'm not the most studious person. I love that book. I mean, it just gave so much of, made me a teenager again. And every time you were talking about a band, I would put that album on and I would play it as I'm reading, just to kind of get the feel for what we were talking about. So, or what the book was referring to and referencing. But,
if I jump in a second,
Yeah.
I mean, like, once again, to go back to Dan I can remember vividly, after, I think, was it Leprosy, or was it the Whiplash, when you told me, like, you were going to go on to your regular job and no longer do it, you know what I mean? And, he put in a good word for me for Chuck, and like I said, is really probably wasn't for that, you know what I mean? Even though, like with the Agent Steel, I helped out the Whiplash, Coroner, some of the band, like Crimson Glory, that helped out as an assistant or engineering. If it really wasn't for that, you know what I mean? I think, him putting in the good word, because like I said, I don't know who Chuck, he was very, protective about who he worked with. He wasn't, into trying new things. So he had a lot of trust in Dan. And I think because of that, you know what I mean, that really helped out, so, and it was just really nice back in those days because, like I said, there was a lot of camaraderie, and it really wasn't like nowadays, like Tim and Drew, you were saying, is that, death metal or extreme metal or the heavier stuff is really popular. But back then it really, in Europe, like you're saying with the zines and all that, it was always popular, but it really wasn't so popular in America compared, the big bands, Slayer, Metallica, Overkill, Annihilator, those guys were Testament, were really doing well, but our stuff was, still pretty underground. And, all the bands, I'm not trying to say everyone got along perfectly, but, everybody came out to see the shows, like back to Tim's picture on Slowly We Rot. Those guys playing Obituary when they were Executioner, opening for Death at the Sunset Club. I mean, there's probably a video of it somewhere. I mean, with the flash pots that Big Daddy did and the urns and the Spanish moss and the smoke. I mean, they looked professional as fuck.
Yes.
At 15,
Right.
16.
Yes.
And I mean, so, I mean, all the bands were, like you said, trying to make sure they didn't cheat because the production, Dan made everything, we made it sound so clean, or tried to make sure nobody was cheating. But it was, I think in that it bred this camaraderie of who could play faster, heavier, more brutal. And, it was really good times back then, and I'm glad we all three of us got to be a part of it,
For sure.
Jim
All
and
those
Tom.
young bands, they all reference the older bands.
Yeah.
Which was your guys, right?
Yeah.
Just those 2 years is a difference, though, from age at that point in time. 2 or 3 years, you're completely different everything, These guys were a couple years younger.
Yeah.
And
You can't say enough about Sabotage and even Nasty Savage. I mean, I know Ronnie's vocals were a little bit different. You know what I mean? Stylized wise, but they were all very big influence on the scene.
They were cutting edge.
Yes, they were.
And
that's the thing is Sabotage, to say is they were original. You don't have to say can't say super original. That's redundant. You don't have to, you can just say it's original, right? They all came out and had a different sound, right? Obituary sounded nothing like Atheist. It sounded nothing like Death. It sounded nothing like Sabotage. It sounded nothing like Nasty Savage. I mean, pick your bands from back, Morbid Angel. I mean, they all were different. You know what I mean? And I think that was what was special is that, we can go, why is Tampa, I mean, Drew, you've been here forever, all guys, why has Tampa always been such a hotbed of hard rock, metal, rock and roll, whatever? But it always has had bands. Like Stranger was a big huge rock band.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Siren.
Yeah.
Siren back in the day.
Yeah.
So now you've had bands come to you and say, I want to sound like Obituary. And you're like, that sound's already taken. Why do you want to sound like another band? It is what it is, but they have such a, every band that formulated back in the 80s, the 15-year-old I was, we took a piece of everything. We definitely took pieces of Nasty Savage, Slayer, Morbid Angel. I mean, our band, we were just trying to, the influences were just so, I would say, made me a better guitar player for one, because sitting there and trying to play Ben Meyer and Dave Austin leads, going nuts on the guitar. I mean, I couldn't play that shit, but it made me a better guitar player. But I mean, the scene back in the day, it snowballed into what is commonly referred to as the death metal capital of the world. Yeah. And, it is always going to be that, in my opinion. And we're going to, I kind of wanted to drop back a little bit and talk about your upbringing, Scott, and how you got into sound engineering and the desire to do that. Tell me about your first soundboard. I know you said you were mixing at clubs and whatnot. Were you born in Florida originally?
No, but we moved when I was like 3 or 4. Okay. So, I mean, I've always lived in Pinellas County. I'm the other side of the bay. So I'm not on the Tampa side. I'm on the St. Pete side.
What got you into the interest of doing sound and getting into the bands?
Well, like I said, as me and Tim were friends, and his roommate had like a post-punk rock band, and nobody really could play that well, and they needed a sound man, and I played trombone forever in band, and I just liked music, and they were like, hey man, the guitarist was like, hey, I'll teach you how to do sound, and he had like a PA, and he actually had a nice PA for being a local crappy band, and so I just started doing that. Like I said, we won a contest, some battle of the bands, and went to a studio, and I really liked it. And then this studio was really shit, and the guy didn't give a crap about us, because once again it was like punk rock or anything. So he was like, "Oh fuck you guys."
Are these like Tascam 12-channel mixers, or what were you working, like the original product that you put your hands on? Do you remember what it was?
I got no idea.
Yeah,
I got bumpkins. I don't know. It could be any bumpkins. I don't know. It was some studio, but it was some Hayes. Sorry, they're probably dead now. Hayes recording studio in down on whatever, and they did jingles. That was the whole thing.
That was the second one you were thinking about.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
We were in the green room talking, and he's like, it was more sound than some other one. I couldn't think of it, but yeah, Hayes.
But they did, and he was a nice fella, but I mean, he just really wasn't interested in all that. And like I said, that's how I walked around. I said, so I'll pay money, and I said, I'll record a 7-inch for you guys, and I'll pay half the money, and because they didn't have a bunch of money, and that way I get to record. And that's when I found Jim and Tom and Rick, and so they would make sure I didn't fuck it up too bad. So we did it in the little, because you did Sirens at the
on Florida,
right? Yep. And so they had a little 8-track room, which Drew, it was with the booth, a little booth. It's probably smaller than your studio here.
Wow.
Okay.
It's really small.
We have a huge studio here at the Drinking with Drew show.
No, it's a nice studio, and I mean, but it was a small room, but it sounded killer.
Now, were you career minded at that point, or was this kind of like a stopping point on your way to do something else in life? What was your mindset?
Oh no, I don't know. We were just hanging out, drinking, smoking weed, listening to rock and roll. I mean, I don't know if we had any ambitions whatsoever, but I liked doing sound. And then when they offered me a job as an assistant engineer, because the studio manager, Susie, she moved away. They needed somebody at night. And then they got Roger, who was the studio manager forever, Roger Stephen, who plays drums with Atlanta Rhythm Sections. Amazing. And so I just started working at nights. And that was it. And I had a lot of fun. I mean, but no, I really didn't have any, I don't know. I mean, I always thought, oh, it'd be killer to record like the bands that you like, right? I mean, everybody grows up saying, oh, like, you know, if you grew up listening to Metallica, I want to record Metallica. Well, hell, by the time you learn how to record, then they're not going to want anything to do with you, whatever, right? But anyway, it was just a good time, but I had no idea, Drew. Like I said, sure, I would have thought, oh, this would be killer, but I never really thought, there was never a straight path like saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I mean, I guess within a few years, the studio, you know, as we got popular and we got more equipment, you know what I mean? Like before we had a sound workshop Series 34 console that Dan probably worked on a lot. And then we're able to get the money for a solid state Logic board. You know, that was a really big deal. And, you know, and to be honest, I was just happy at the end. I was just happy like to be an engineer. Like I said, it really didn't matter. I still would say this to me. Dan's more of a producer than me. I was just more of an engineer. And, but I was just happy. It was fun to be in a studio to record bands, no matter if they were death metal, heavy metal, rock and roll, or whatever. People that cared about their craft and tried to make a good record. You know, and that's what was really fun, was working with professionals. And I'll say that about the death metal guys, the thrash, whatever, is the people that were professional that came in. It was fun to record and be a part of that process. Wouldn't you agree? And like when you're taking pictures, right? It's fun to take pictures, do pictures where it's professional, or it's, you know, you're not just, like you said, you worked for years at not Olin Mills, but it was Glamour Shots and doing that as a 9 to 5 to make money. It's not that fulfilling, right? And doing karaoke or whatever that comes in the door as a right. studio engineer is not that fun. So we were really lucky.
You want to do anyway.
Correct.
Period.
Absolutely.
It's better than anything else.
So the Agent Steel, where was that in your chronological order of, was that
that was, yeah, because I mean, when you came in with them, that was one of the first things ever. And basically, you know, I was just you know what I mean? It was you and Jim and then me and stuff like that, because there were some difficulties. But no, that was really early on. And then
it says 1987 in the book. Does that sound right?
Yeah, because I probably started, Drew, probably in 83, 84 as an assistant.
Well, what was Whiplash before the Agent Steel? No.
I think Whiplash was after, I think.
Was it after?
After, I think. Yeah.
Was it 86?
Ticket to Mayhem?
It says 1989 Whiplash.
Okay,
yeah,
so it was.
Say, yeah. So, yeah, and, you know, those guys were cool, but yeah, so, you know, you were doing the Crimson Glory and stuff like that, the first one, and then the second one, like I said, back to.
But that's when you honed one of your finest skills. He just started. Here, we're gonna get into some good stuff here. The Agent Steel. What what'd you say again? Could you repeat that? We were having what? Difficulties. Scott, that's where Scott started honing his craft of he has this uncanny ability to be able to get along with people.
Yeah. I've heard that.
With difficult people.
Yeah.
And that was, man, that was a shit show. I mean, your very first dose of that was like, I don't know. You can talk. It was your career, but that had to be like, that had to be one of the most challenging ones, I would have to say.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was so young, I had no idea what was going on, except, you know, that some of the members were probably a little more crazy than others. And, you know, it was just I mean, it was my job then to make sure as the assistant or the engineer that we got the record done for you. And, you know, it was difficult. You know, I'll just, then we'll take a step back but it's hard enough to try and keep on budget. You would agree and get a record done and make something that's a good product that your record label's happy with, that you're happy with, that the band's happy with. But when you're having internal turmoil in the band, that gets to be difficult too, when people are fighting with not just you, with just personal demons and, you know, just kind of not being helpful. And that's what makes it hard and that's where I think you have to put on a different hat of being not just being a technician, but, you know, as trying to get along with people to, you know, keep moving the ball forward, to keep rolling down the thing. Because at the end of the day like you said, Dan, I think we had our reputation, the studio and us, for always getting projects done in a timely manner that arguably sounded good. I mean, some were better than others, and people can debate that, but we always got them done. And, you know, we never had to come back to the label and say like, hey man, I need another 20 grand or I need another 10 grand or whatever. We delivered a product, and that's important because, you know, you can speak to the label side, Dan, but I'm sure a lot of labels have gotten burned by bands where they just keep funneling them money, and that never was the case with us.
Well, we would agree on a price to deliver a product, and we had to deliver that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, well, for me, that would mean less money for me.
Yeah.
You know, in certain cases, because we wanted to spend more time in the studio. So there was no going over budget.
No.
I mean, it was an agreed to price, and that's the way it worked back then.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, you brought up the joke about me sleeping at the studio, and it's another band I should bring up that we didn't bring up when we talk about Tampa death metal is Cannibal Corpse. And in the beginning, I probably don't say anything because they really were a Buffalo band, but they moved down right away.
Right.
But I mean, like, you know, for instance, is these guys in these bands and the budgets is like, you know, they would pay to drive down on their own. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, some of the budgets weren't even $10,000. They were $5,000 that I did in the beginning. But the whole point is that those guys were all dedicated. So like you said, Dan, Jim and Tom were always pretty reasonable about, like, we would block out 12-hour shifts the studio. We would block it out for the day, the whole day, and for a week or something like that. And depending on how long they had, and that would allow us to keep all our equipment set up, because a lot of the time in a studio is spent, probably, as you know, Drew, is setting up equipment, breaking it down, and especially if you're trying to make something sound the same, like a guitar or a drum, it's very hard to break the kit down, break a stack down, and get the same sound. Now, nowadays, it's a whole different thing. But back in the day when everything was recorded with a mic, that was different. So that's the joke about sleeping there or trying to work 16, 18-hour days is, you know, it's like, you know, how can we make a baby in less than 9 months? Well, we'll get 9 women. Right? Well, the only thing we can do is that we can work a 24-hour day, right? So, in other words, we can try and work longer and sleep.
Now, were you single back then? Or were you with your
No, I was with my wife, but
okay.
we didn't get married till 1990.
Now, did she actually believe you were sleeping in the studio? Or was she like Laura, like, yeah, right, you're sleeping in the studio?
No, because I didn't, to be honest, I did not do it that often. I mean, I did it occasionally. It's really just occasionally. But we really would work very long days. I mean, more than 12. Jim and Tom and Roger, you know, the studio manager, were always very considerate to let us go longer and not really bill more time. But I think, back to Dan's point, is that's how we were always able to give a quality product on a shoestring budget. And as the years went by, Chuck, the Obituary guys, the Deicide guys, a lot of Cannibal guys, I forget, the Morbid guys who Tom worked with, their budgets got bigger and bigger. And so there was more time and money, but for the most part in the beginning, they were smaller budgets.
smaller budgets with different equipment.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, we had 24 tracks
Yeah.
to get all of that sound, on 24 tracks in the very beginning. That's all we had.
Yeah.
And it was a completely different experience. And again, no pro. It was, you had to get a good performance.
No Pro Tools. Nope.
Yeah. You had to get a good performance. I mean, there was some slicing of 2-inch tape, but we're doing that stuff on shoestring budgets and still splicing 2-inch tape. And I mean, it's pretty amazing what we were able to turn out for what the price was.
With some of these bands that came in, and in the book, there's some personality conflicts that are mentioned. Were you able, as a producer and engineer, working with these bands over time, either of you, could you foresee a lineup not working? Like, you're like, this probably, I don't see this band lineup lasting long term just because of the conflicts you saw personally in the studio?
For me, I mean, once again, we go back to the Agent Steel being one of the early ones. And that, I mean, for my short-lived career, that was definitely the most challenging one for us. I mean, for me. But we got everything out and everything. I mean, you dealt with a lot more people in terms of different personalities. But once again, these were kids. They were determined to go in there. I mean, for the most part.
Yes.
I was working with a lot of these guys before they were ever heard of. So there was no egos involved, and there's no history that I had to deal with. So I was fortunate in that way. But again, in the early days, I think everybody's goal was still the same. It was a shared focus on, let's try to get this out, get it to sound as good as we can. Not too polished, but I mean, that was one of the things that maybe I was a little criticized for, as I wanted to polish things up a little bit. I just wanted good performances and be able to hear everything that's going on, for the average listener to be able to, I can hear the bass, I can hear the guitar, both guitars, the vocals, maybe turn the snare down, maybe turn the snare down.
When you made some suggestions like that, did like with Donald Tardy, let's just, I'll say it, and making suggestions on using smaller cymbals, and Steve Asim making suggestions on snare drums and doing did some of that, were you risking a relationship, or as a professional, you're just throwing that out there because it's going to work?
Yeah, I think they're just throwing it out there because, like I said, I was never a Nazi. I never said you had to fucking do this. I would suggest things that would say hey, I think that maybe this would sound better, or something like that. But like your question, like with Steve, I mean, I brought this up to him a couple of years ago at the Milwaukee Metal Fest, and he didn't even, at the Philadelphia Beer and Metal Fest, and he doesn't even really remember. But like I said, is like trying to play with some smaller cymbals so you get less bleed. Like nowadays, they gate everything and it's triggered. You don't even hear a fucking cymbal on a record on half the death metal stuff is. And that's a whole nother topic. I mean, it's like, why do you guys hate cymbals? You should just get rolling as your drum machine and play. But anyway, but like I said, is, I say to him, hey, maybe try, if you use smaller hi-hats or smaller cymbals,
right,
you have less overring and stuff like that, and it gets a little bit cleaner just to try. And he was like, he played it and he said, no, man, that doesn't sound like me. And that was it. That was the end of the story. It doesn't really matter. And that's what I'm saying is I never really considered myself a producer on certain things, is because, like I said, a lot of the stuff I did it's just 220 beats per minute. It's fast. It's supposed to be heavy, and that's it. And, you're not trying to rewrite anybody's song and things like that and if you tried to, it probably wouldn't have worked out so well. I would say that. But I mean, like I said, I think everyone's open to suggestions, but when you're trying to change them for what they are, then that's not it. And so, especially my stuff. And one thing I was going to say back to Dan's point is, and Drew, you probably remember this because you've been here forever, is that, we were very fortunate. Tom had a relationship with Elliot Rubinson, from who owned Thoroughbred Music, or Elliot from Thoroughbred. I forget his last name. I'm sorry, but he would always, nowadays you have plugins and everybody records direct, and you can dial up any. Doesn't matter what guitar sound you have. They don't give a fuck. You just play, and then they change the guitar sound, whatever. Elliot had the huge the music store, Thoroughbred, and you could go in there, and he would give us. You could get Tama drums, DW, whatever, Yamaha. Pick any kit you wanted, and we could rent it. We could get new heads. We could get any amplifiers we wanted, and he would give them, because of Tom, at a discount for these bands. And that really helped us to get a good sound, because like Dan said, is rather, for the people out there that think my sound's shit, that's cool, I get you, right? Or whoever doesn't like more sound or whatever, that's fine, I get you. But we always tried to start with at least clean, new strings, new heads, and quality equipment. So when you stuck the mic in front of it, it sounded good. You weren't trying to EQ the mic to make it sound good, because the shit coming out of the amplifier sounded like shit, the sound coming out. So we were really lucky in that regard, is because we had like the best music store, arguably, in America.
Right.
Thoroughbred was huge, and you remember them. So that's it.
Yeah. And some bands came in and they were amazed that they had a brand new Tama drum set for the recording. They thought they were going to use their rinky-dinky, Pearl that they had set up. And you just wouldn't allow it? You just said, no, this is not going to work.
No. We would, whatever, if you came in with your kit, unless it was bad, like, I'll give you, unless it was super bad, we let everybody use their own stuff, but we put new heads on it to make it sound good.
Okay.
And then, like I said, I think, it came down to the producer or whatever saying is, hey, maybe try it. But that's a big lift to make somebody play a totally different kit and play fast. So, but I just meant is that if they wanted to go, like for instance, if they said hey, I play a Pearl and I don't like this, my kit's old, we could say, hey man, you can go to Thoroughbred and you can get one, and they could pick out what they liked.
Right.
Which is that. But we never forced anyone to play anything. And like I said, I think one thing is, like, there was a knock on Morrisound that we had for everything sounds the same. Well, I will disagree with that. If you go look back on a lot of the records, Leprosy sounds nothing like Spiritual Healing.
Right.
Spiritual Healing sounds nothing like Human. Right. You can pick lots of bands or whatever, and there may be certain things about the stuff I did or that we did that sounds similar, but we didn't have just one drum kit. We didn't have, you know what I mean? We would let whoever play with whatever, but we said, hey, let's use new heads, let's use new strings, let's use quality equipment,
right,
whatever it is.
Well, even when you had Massacre come in, and it's members of Death, but they sounded nothing like Death. Like the recordings didn't sound the same. So,
correct.
I agree with what you're saying. Dan, you were going to say something?
No, it would be, hey, we have this, we can play through your head. Let's go ahead and do a couple of takes, but we have this other head. Let's plug in this.
Sure.
Let's just try this other head.
Yes.
Or let's take your head with this cabinet. We have this other cabinet here.
Yes.
Try that. And if they were going to go along with it, they went along with it. And like you said, if that's not what they wanted, then that's not what we're going to do.
Yeah.
But even small suggestions, which came out to be huge suggestions, were just like even putting pillowcases in the bass drums, which was new to a lot of people. They weren't even doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I think because typically BMO just would stick like tape quarters and stuff on the front of the head because the head was so shot and dead to get that attack. But it was like, no, if you tune the head and then you put the pillow and hold something, like in our case, everybody's going to laugh. We used gallon paint drums, but it would hold the pillow up against the head. You could get a tack and tune it down deep enough so you'd get a good sound. You know what I mean? Now, with a lot of my stuff and whatever is we would trigger the kick drums because it was all so fast that you really didn't have much dynamics. Snare drum's a whole different story, but with kick drums is, you know what I mean? Basically, you just want to hear double bass flying, and there's not a lot of slow stuff. Now, on some of the slower stuff, you know what I mean? It's, once again, it was still important that you could listen to the acoustic sounds, and they still sounded good.
Yeah. Now, in the studio, I understand that a lot of stuff is happenstance, and a story that really stood out to me was the phone call that was made from James Murphy when Obituary was recording in there, and that just happened to work out to where he came in and recorded. Can you tell me more about that and how that because I never even realized that until I read the book, but that's a pretty interesting story.
James came in on Cause of Death, right?
Yeah, Cause of Death. Yeah, that was
correct. Yeah, and James was killer. And like I said, we need somebody to play lead. And I don't know, Alan was he gone?
He had a baby, and he had to go and deal with some family stuff.
Correct. So Alan's leaving, and like I said, and James was great. And there wasn't a lot of great, there wasn't a lot of, in the death metal world, there was more like styles of Rick Ross and stuff. People, Kerry King, the whammy bar style, which is great, frantic, you know what I mean? Where there wasn't as much as the true metal guys, like the kid in Agent Steel was Bernie and Juan. I mean, who were really good players. Yeah. And so, James was really good to be able to play that. And I think, so this will be bad, but Cause of Death is before or after Spiritual. So, I don't know if he'd already been playing with Chuck by then.
Yeah, I think he did. Then he got let go.
Yeah.
And so that's why he was in Jacksonville hanging out.
Correct. And so he was already on Spiritual. And like I said, and he was very, very good. And he was a melodic player. And at the time, they needed someone, and he was a good fit. And so I think that's how it worked out. And James is an amazing guitarist. And at the time, especially, there wasn't a lot of guys like him that could really that were into death metal that could, play neoclassical or sweep and things like that, like Ralph and all that. You know what I mean? So he was, really beneficial to the scene.
All right. Going over to Brazil and recording Sepultura. Tell me about that with getting robbed and your experiences over there.
Well,
fun times.
Yeah. The robbery was very small. They just came into the hotel room, and I just had some stuff, a little bit of money, and had a boom box. It was
5 pounds of weed.
No. I didn't have any 5 pounds of weed. Yeah, that would have been hard.
Right.
But
getting through customs, I was amazed to see they were charging you for the equipment you were bringing over there. And you had to pay out of pocket to bring amp heads over there, and they were taxed.
Tariffs.
Tariffs back in the day. Yeah.
Favorite word right now.
So there was 100. Yeah, I guess Brazil's always had this. They used to have this policy of they didn't have technology, so they would.
We call it corruption.
Well, corruption's a good word because that's what we had to pay.
Tariffs.
That's what we had to pay to the airport people, right? That, in other words,
you shopped them around.
Correct. Max had a friend, and we just kept going around until we got them down to like $300. It started at $1,000, but they didn't have a lot of equipment, so we brought some drum heads for Igor and an amp head and sticks and things like that, and strings and things like that. Once again, back to just having good quality tools to play with, and so it took a while, and then we got through customs, $300. And that was, once again, Roadrunner. It was, it makes for a good story. We called Monty right away, and he was the king as always, and he sent us some more money. But yeah, it pretty much took up most of the money that I had for the food and stuff like that and things like that. But they sent the money, and it all worked out. But it was quite a different situation because it definitely is not America.
Back then you didn't have Cash App or PayPal. Like when you say sent the money, it wasn't there like in an hour.
No, it wasn't there. I even forget how we got the money. That's a good point, Drew.
Western
Union.
Wire.
Yeah, Wire. Thanks, Dan.
Donkey.
Yeah. But no, it was cool. Those guys were killer too, Sepultura. Obviously, they were huge, and they were part of the. They came and they did a rise and stuff, and they were great. Come on. Those guys are the best.
For sure. Then they came back and recorded with you and more sound. Tell me about there's a comment in the book where you're talking about a little, I guess, overworked and maybe a little stressed, and you basically told Glenn, leave me alone, I'm going to Taco Bell. Was that the go-to for the stress release back then?
Probably just to get away. Taco Bell was down the road, but
still there.
Glenn's a good guy, but I mean, there was always, some of the bands handled money better than other, and there was always a little bit of friction between, say, Monty or Glenn and Roadrunner. So, and that would be, as Monty is the A&R guy, that would probably be him or Doug Keogh of, I want my money and stuff. And so, there were times when Glenn would say, I need some money, and, I'd have to figure out ways to get him money out of the budget. And then, I don't know. So at times it probably got to be frustrating for sure.
Are there any bands that you look back now and you're just like, if they stuck around, if they put some more effort into it, they could have been the next Slayer? They just didn't. The personalities just didn't click, and the music was amazing, but they just didn't stick around. 'Cause I see a lot of names in the book where they did a great album, but then they split up, a year later.
Yeah, I mean, I think Drew, it's two things. We can sit there and I can pontificate on what I think about all the bands, and it really doesn't fucking matter, or any of us, because you as a fan and all the people out there that are fans, they really decide the band's future, right? We can say that we think this album is the best album or this album sounds the best. Nobody really gives a fuck. It's the kids that buy the records. And as long as the kids buy the records, then that's really what decides it. Now, there's some bands like, the Exhorder guys were killer. And, like you can classify them as similar to Pantera. But they had internal problems where they didn't tend to get along, I guess. And it probably hurt their career. And that's why, now they're, Kyle's still around, but, Jay and Vinny are not in the band. But it's difficult for me to say that. But I think in the long run is that the fans really decide what's good and what's bad and who sticks around. And, because most of the bands, nobody passed away. I mean, unfortunately, Roger from Atheist, that was a big blow on them. But I think the kids really decide, the fans, on what they like and whatever. And, when the second album or third album comes out, if they still like it or don't like it, then they make the decisions. And, I think us as engineers, producers or whatever, we probably get too much credit when it goes well, and, we get crucified when it goes bad. But really, I don't know, the bands make, it's up to the fans and what they think of the bands.
Yeah. Dan, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, and as long as, you can stay together as a unit.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Because it's a business, and, you got to treat it as a business, unfortunately.
And Tim, you go back to your, the coffin thing, like, our friend Flash had the, we had the idea to make the coffins, and it probably didn't work out really that well, but it is one of the most memorable things. So, I mean, in some ways, there's pros and cons to everything.
Right.
I mean,
I don't know, but I do know after Harmony Corruption, it wasn't as popular.
Right.
Now it's the most popular. Right.
Yeah, sure.
It's crazy.
Oh,
everybody's opinions, it changes.
Absolutely. Right? No, it's in the book. I sat there with Mick, the drummer, and he fucking hated it. And he had me put in Left Hand Path from Entomb, which is one of the great album. He said, it doesn't sound like this. I think it sucks. You win some, you lose some. Right. But now, people like it. So that's, like I said, so sometimes it's pointless for me to say what I think is good and bad, because really the kids are the ones that buy the T-shirts, that buy the records, that go to the shows. That's it.
I'll tell you real quick.
And hindsight is so much easier than foresight.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting in there trying to make this and do this, that's foresight. I mean, hindsight is real easy, for the armchair critics.
It is.
And of course, I know that if I would do several things different if I had the money and time to do them over again. Obviously, once again, you're bound by budget. There's deliverables that you're responsible for, and it wasn't the $100,000 budgets. So you
win some, you lose some. So you just try, and I think the one thing we can say is that no matter what, man, we tried our best for all the bands, right? I mean, we took it as like our, we put our name and reputation on it. And at the time, we lived and died with those records. Yep. You mentioned earlier, Drew, about the lifetime of a band. I don't think, for me personally, we just thought of the record. What we were doing is, I don't think I ever had foresight. Dan may be different as a record label owner to think about a career of a band or whatever. And I don't know, Tim, when you're shooting photos, but that album, that 40 minutes or 42 minutes, 8 songs, getting that done and making it the best record we could. That's all we really thought about. And sometimes it worked out well, sometimes it didn't, but I'll say this, we always tried our fucking hardest and we never fucking mailed it in on anybody.
Yeah. Tim, you had something you were going to throw out?
Just like he is, right? He's just the nicest guy in the world. That's why he got that hat to wear, right? Because he is that guy. But he never wants to take credit from years and years. I would tell him, dude, people are writing about you online.
Right.
People keep talking about you. I mean, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then finally, I got him, you should take credit for this, right? And that's what that whole thing ended up coming out. And it's great that David, professional writer, put that together.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it wouldn't have come out like that if we kept down that path.
Right.
We might have it done.
Well, there's a story in there,
right?
Scott, about you not taking points on albums. Like, what was the decision behind that? That wasn't your style?
Probably too nice. I don't know.
Well,
he didn't have a manager.
Right. I should have hired Dan. But I think there's two things. I think on the first Cannibal Corpse record, everybody said, "Oh, you need to take points" or something like that. So I had a point or something like that. And then on the first Deicide, I think same thing. I had a point or two, whatever, on the record. But I can vividly remember that, like, when Cannibal came back in for Butchered, I think, or something, I'd gotten, and I had no idea. Once again, Dan can speak better to this as a record label owner. But I got an accounting statement. And like I said, Eating Back to Life was $5,000 or something like that. I made $800. And those guys paid to drive down here, paid their own gas. I think they paid the hotel room. The Cannibal guys did. Anyway, and then I get this accounting statement, and it's all this fucking gobbledygook. And it says, like, they owe them $500,000. And I was like, how the fuck are these guys ever going to make any money? And then here I am taking fucking money off of it. And so I never felt comfortable about it. And I guess there's, and same thing with Deicide. So I ended up giving it back to them because I was like, whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. And I'll say this about another guy who's a producer. He's passed now, and I really liked him when I was a kid. His name is, obviously, he's pretty famous for, not in metal, but Steve Albini. Yeah. And he had a band called Big Black, who I really dug when I was a kid. But anyway, he wrote this letter, and I read it. This is after he passed. Albert from Decibels shared it with me. And, and I think I agree with him on this point, is when he went to do the Nirvana album, which is fucking some, huge band, way above my pay grade. But he was like, look, I'm just like the plumber. You're just paying me money for a service. So I think the same thing is, right, I looked at it differently, and Dan can speak to how he thinks or whatever it is, but I just meant is you're paying me to do a job, and I'm doing it. I don't think I should make money off of it forever, because in my opinion, most of these bands, they get fucked. They sign a lot of, the labels give them a lot of bad deals. And I'm not saying on your side, Dan, but I'm saying is on the Roadrunner side, the Metal Blade side, and I'm not saying they gave them bad deals, but a lot of these labels, they wrap them up for a long time. And so I just felt is, why should I be making that money? I'm done, right? I did my job. I got paid. That's it. So that's why I never was really that comfortable with it.
Okay. And do you have any, I guess, I don't want to say bad blood because that's not your style.
Yeah, you motherfuckers, I'm fucking broke, and I want you all to fucking put a GoFundMe together right now.
Venmo me.
Well,
Venmo me your money. I see how much you're making on them T-shirts, goddammit.
Merch sales.
right.
No, I don't. No,
with
nothing. You
the-
couldn't pay me. I wouldn't take their money if they gave it
With
to
the
me.
re-release of Spiritual Healing, you were removed as the producer. What was your that was tough.
Like what?
It was horrible.
I mean,
So here,
but-
I'll say this, Drew, and you can decide if you want to cut this. I won't talk bad about anybody. Eric Grive is dead. He's a fucking douchebag, and I'll leave it at that.
not
And if
taking that out.
And that's it. But I just mean is that, look, I never asked to be the producer. Chuck put me on there. Chuck didn't want him to be on there. He can talk all the shit he wants, but now he's passed away and he can't. But back in the day, to take my name off it and put his name on it, that's fucking low. Because like I said I had no points. I had nothing. Why do that? It's just purely ego. And he fucked everybody around. He was a bad manager. And he wasn't cool at all. And he's the only person I will say that about. And I know he's dead, and I shouldn't say that about dead people. But he wasn't a good guy. And what he did was a lot of bad things to a lot of the players and death and stuff like that. Those kids too, those guys, those grown men now, they could have used that money.
Right.
And I don't know if David, once again, I would really prefer if you speak to David Gelke about it or whatever, and Chuck's family. But he's a bad dude. He was a bad guy. And I mean, part of that is Chuck signed the deal with him, so some of that's on Chuck. And he unfortunately, he can't speak with us for us either. But no, he was your definition of a corrupt manager, which is the stuff that made me realize why fuck this, taking all this money. I got paid. I'm doing fine. And these guys, they wrote the songs. They should be able to eat because they should make the money. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah. I agree. I want to thank Scott Burns, Dan Johnson, and Tim Hubbard for coming out to the show. They have been a huge influence in my life. Unfortunately, my computer had an issue and it froze up towards the end of the interview, and we did not get that final wrap up completed before they left. So I apologize for that. But again, I want to thank them for coming out. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview, and we will see them at the Museum of Metal. Be sure to check that out coming up at the end of February. Talk to you soon.
All right, end the show.
That's it. Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, everybody. All right, everybody. This has been another episode of the Drinking with Drew show. Check us out every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Spread the word, spread the love. Check us out on all of our socials: Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Humble Social. Big thank you to our sponsor, InLawWeTrust.com. We'll see you next week.